Resuming debate, the honourable member for Steveston, Richmond East.
Monsieur le Président, je suis vraiment fier d'être.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to be here this afternoon to support my colleague's motion, the member for King Vaughan. My name is Giuseppe Eduardo Peschisolido, and I am the son of my parents, my grandmother, my grandfather. My grandfather's name was Giovanni, and
della mia collega. Essere qui e parlare un po' di italiano e aussi un po' di français. This motion deals, Mr. Speaker, with culture, with music, the wonderful contributions of Italians throughout civilization and Italians here in Canada. But as my colleague from Okanagan Centre mentioned, this is more than about language, more about culture, more than about a philosophy or architecture. It's about people. It's about the many people of Italian background that came here to Canada to build a new life for themselves, but more importantly, for their children and their grandchildren. My colleague from Vaughan Woodbridge eloquently discussed the pioneers, the famous folk who trailblazed for the Italian community. And as a young boy, I'd head over with a good friend of mine, and he's like my fratello, Pino Correale. We'd go to the Columbus Center that Senator Condonino and Sam Ciccolini worked so hard to build. And my colleague from King Vaughan talked about Corriere Canadese and former members of Parliament, and Joe Volpe, who stepped back in to become the publisher and owner of Corriere Canadese, so that you'd have a thriving Italian voice in Toronto. And the motto of Corriere Canadese is to be proud of one's Italian heritage, but to be fiercely Canadian. And also, I believe, Mr. Speaker, that's what we're celebrating today. We're celebrating the integration of millions of Canadians of Italian background who came with nothing. My colleague from Hastings, Lennox Addington, his family came on the second wave of immigration, as did mine. My mom and dad and my grandparents came from nothing, from a little town called Ceprano, which is in between Naples and Rome. And that's significant because it was the supply lines during the Second World War. So my father, my mother, and my grandparents' education and livelihood for 8, 9 years and a bit before was making sure they didn't get killed during war. So themselves and a whole lot of other folks came over with nothing. And my parents and grandparents stopped off in Halifax, and just like my colleague from Hastings, Lennox Addington, they also thought that they had come to the wrong place, perhaps a purgatory and not a heaven. And yet they then moved on to Toronto, where my mom started to go to school, but she was 14 and they put her, my mother, Margarita, Nina. She was 14 years old and she hung out with 6- and 8-year-olds. Well, guess what? She didn't stay in school long, but she went out and she worked. And that is what a lot of immigrants did. They went out and worked. And my father, who is my hero, Loreto, or as I say, Papa, when I would go to him and I'd bring back a report card, I was proud, I had 88. And his response, Mr. Speaker, what happened to the other 12? And that is the strength of the community, the importance of education, the importance of family, of faith, of social justice. And I am proud, Mr. Speaker, today, this afternoon, to stand in the House to support this motion of my colleague from King Vaughan and encourage all members to support the motion as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate.